Alrighty, here is our dragonfly, and we are going to start with its head. Now, if I put my finger here, you will see that I drew around my finger to create its head. If I put two fingers here, it would make the head even bigger. So we want to examine how many heads we need to develop our dragonfly and to make it fit onto the page and not make it too small. I say that because A.M. Snyder from Snyder's Sunshine Art Studio has been teaching long enough to know that children and students tend to make things really small on their paper, and we want to fill the space, so we're going to use the word proportion. The head is the one thing we want to look at to find out how everything else in its body relates to it. By doing that, we can make it fit on the page bigger, and we can make it look more realistic. Now, our drawing here of the dragonfly is not totally realistic, but it does lend itself to knowing that it represents our dragonfly. Because I used that technique that artists use in regard to proportion, the relationship of one thing to the entire thing. Okay, so the head in relationship to its body, and then we look at the wings in relationship to its body as well, and then we just add our little extras here, which of course then throws off some of that realism because we're just adding the things. All right, with that knowledge, let's get into our dragonfly drawing. We're going to start on the side here, as mentioned, because that's where we're going to position its head so we can fit the body on. So we have to pre-think about the layout of everything so that we make sure that it fits. Now, I'll just say, sometimes A.M. Snyder doesn't totally do that, and then I tend to draw too big because I'm always emphasizing to my students to draw big, and then my images usually go off the page. But I'm going to stick with what I just said because I'm teaching you this. So using my finger, here's one knuckle, another knuckle. If I start where that knuckle is, knuckle being where my fingers bend, and then I draw around, that's going to give me the head. Okay, now I can see already that's going to be a little too big, and I'm going to just continue to draw the circular shape here, but I'm just going to bring it in now, and that's going to give me the idea of what size I need. Okay, now this circular motion, this drawing technique is very enjoyable to loosen up your body and your hands to be more flexible and open to making multiple lines. It's freeing. That's the bottom line from A.M. Snyder here. It's just freeing to draw and move your arm and make marks. So it's a relaxing technique that you could do prior to drawing to loosen up that tightness and stiffness and the stress that many students get into because they're trying to make it look perfect. Now, you don't have to make anything perfect. You just have to make it so that you enjoy it. That's how I look at it. So keep that in mind. All right, so now that we have the head here, I'm going to divide the head with a curvy line in this direction. And I'm going to make an X, okay? And I'm going to divide it up. So we have some math going on here. We had a whole, we divided it in half. Now we have it in fours, right? 4 pizza pie slices. We can divide it even more and actually turn it into a pizza with 8 slices. By doing this lightly, by the way, lightly, we get some points where we can estimate where other things will go, okay? It also guides us for the next part, which is its body. This line here, if I continue it, will give me more of a direction of where its body will go. Okay, so if I just continue that curve. Now, we want this dragonfly to be about 6 heads. So if I take my finger and I hop it over and I just mark it off, that's 2, 3, 4, 5, and then we have 6, okay? Now, as I'm drawing, if it looks like it's too long or too short, I can add or I can take away, okay? So visually, as the artist, you make those adjustments. All right, so I have these points right here, which then help guide me for its body, okay? And I'm going to draw in, so I have 2 heads for that part of its body. And then we have these back pieces, which get narrow, these segments, and they get narrow as they go back, okay? So I'm using curved lines. For some reason, they remind me of a section of hot dog, if you cut up a hot dog. Sounds kind of gross, I know. We're not cutting up a dragonfly, by the way. Now, just side note, A.M. Snyder, when I'm usually teaching in a classroom, I tend to just talk sometimes, and sometimes things come out of my mouth that I realize sound kind of gross or unexpected or puts our minds in a different direction and distracts us. So just forget what I said about the hot dog, if that's distracting to you. It's just what happens. We just talk and think in our heads, and then it comes out sometimes. At least that's how it is for me. All right. So now we're going to put in its eye. So this pizza pie slice here helps me define how big the eye is going to be and where it is. And it goes right there. It works very well. See how the division of the head helps guide where other things land. Okay, now this section here is very much the same size for its wings. So I also know this is the same size as my finger, so that's helpful. I'm going to put in its wings. I'll bring back the original drawing for you here so you can see how I drew the one we're doing right now slightly different because I think it made more sense than what I did here. So I can make those adjustments, but you can see how it's like my finger length, okay? So now I'm going to take my finger here, right where this knuckle is to my hand, in the center. See, that guiding line helps me with the center as well. And I'm going to position it, and I'm going to draw around it. Not against it, just around it. And that will give me that wing. And then I can form it out here and make it pointy. And then I can draw this one in. And then I can draw this one in. I use my finger again. Now, I'm going to draw over to the knuckle, but you can also turn the paper and do it, okay? So either way, it's up to you. If you're struggling with this shape, you could think of it as a parallelogram, you could think of it as a teardrop. There's different ways you can think of it. Alright, we have those in there. And now I'm going to draw in its antennae. And put little circles on the end. Now if you're struggling with what I'm doing there, in a moment I'll use a Sharpie and you can see. So you can just hold off on that if you're struggling with it. Alright, now we're going to put in some background elements here. I'm going to use some zigzaggy line at the bottom. And put in a rock. And put in a little rock here. So I always think of dragonflies being near water of some kind. Streams, rivers, ponds, because when I was a kid fishing with my dad, that's where I saw dragonflies. So I'm just drawing what looks like possible pond with lily pads, little organic shapes here and there, and some a little bank over here, ground and rock, and then our grass, some grass that hangs over. And then I put a little bumpy line here to show that there's some shrubbery or bushes over here. And there it is. Now we need to put some legs in here too, so if I go like that, over here's another leg, so most likely I'm not going to see all of it, and there would be a leg behind that wing, but I'm not going to trace that later because I want to see it. And then we have this leg, and we would have another one in here. So again, this is going to be behind the wing, but I'm going to show the bottom of its leg, and then the other one would be over here somewhere. Alright, now that we have all of that, I'm going to get my Sharpie. You get your Sharpie or your permanent marker, and I have some extra eraser from another drawing here I should have cleaned up. Let's get that out of there. Alright, so tracing over all lines that I want to keep now. Here's where I have the antennae. So, there it is. Okay. Draw in these amazing wings. I think they're so pretty to look at. Leg. And then the sections of the body. Okay, and then with its eyes here, I'm not going to use the wide Sharpie for this. I'm going to have a narrow Sharpie, okay? And I'm going to put in some curvy lines, and I'm going to overlap them, going in the other direction. And that will make it look a little more buggier, right? How about you? Have you ever seen a dragonfly? Like I said, I saw them when I would go fishing with my dad, and I thought they were so pretty. Their colors, how they can be different colors. They're kind of shiny, metallic, magical looking, and I think that's why they last with me. Besides the fact that the word dragon is in their name, and Snyder enjoys dragons. I enjoy drawing the dragons, and I've learned a few things about different cultures and dragons and how symbolic they are. But this is a dragonfly, and I do wonder what their symbolism is. I should look that up. I'm sure there is some, because humans like to categorize and make up stories about all kinds of things. Now I am using the thin Sharpie for this part, but you can use a wide one too if you want these to be thicker. And there. Just curve lines, and I'm going to add to this some wiggly little lines, because if you ever look at the wings, they always look like they have little tiny cells I'm sure they're very detailed and arranged in a very special way, because they are made by God, and God has special ways to make everything, and they're all ordered in amazing ways to keep things functional. It's incredible. All right. I'm not God, so therefore I'm going to draw it the way I can draw it. All right, so now I'm going to go in and trace the rest of it. Yes, trace the rest with the wide Sharpie. Now, in a moment, I'm going to add what's called hatching lines and a little bit of cross hatching. Hatching lines are used to show shadowing and highlights when we're drawing with pen and ink. It's very similar to what comic books do, and it makes things have highlights so it looks rounded, so it's not totally flat. So these would be considered hatching lines because they're parallel to each other and they're creating a shadowing effect. Okay. It gives an understanding that there's some roundness there. This is not totally giving all that effect because I'm not getting into a huge amount of detail here. So now I can go in here. And I'm making sure they have the direction of the roundness of its body. So this curved line here helps guide that. Same here. And then we have this highlight. Now, I believe that the light source is going to hit directly in the middle of it. So there's going to be a little more of a shadow. There's going to be a little bit of shadow over here. Not a little more. There's going to be a little bit of shadowing. Make sure I say that correctly. Okay. And we can put some on its head here. Actually, I think instead we're just going to thicken up the line to define the shadowing there, because if I use the wide Sharpie in there, trying to make those lines, it's just going to look as I'm showing you right now. So it makes sense just to give it a thicker line to indicate the shadowing. Do that in there. Okay, and now I am going to get the thin Sharpie and do some of these lines in here as well. Now, if you're looking at this and you're like, no, I'm going to mess it up, don't do it. Don't do it. You can simply color it in without this activity. Now I'm crossing these, so this is now cross hatching. And I'm going to add a few of the thin ones going in the original direction. Okay, and I'm going to add some into its wings. Snyder has some background in printmaking. When I was in college, I did a lot of printmaking where we would draw onto linoleum that's adhered to a block, and then we would carve out the linoleum that would be white, the white areas, and whatever was raised up would be inked up with whatever color we're using, most likely black, and then we could make a copy of it resembling a stamp, like a rubber stamp effect. So when I use all these lines and things, it's just my style from the way back when I was in college and the techniques used for that. Alright, now we're going to take an eraser and we are going to erase it. Erase all the pencil that we don't want. Whoops. Yeah, it always likes to do that. The corners of the paper. As much as I always stress doing this, they still do that. I don't know what else to do there. If you have an idea, please give me a comment about it. Now, after I have all this erased, it's going to look like a coloring book page. Before you color it, there is a possibility that if you have a printer and a scanner, of course a computer for all that, you can scan it into your computer, and then you have a copy of it, and you can manipulate it in the computer. You can make it different sizes and put it into programs and change colors on it and so on. Always like the idea of taking my drawings and then putting them into the computer, making them smaller and making cards. So that's something you could always look into doing. Alright, well now we have our drawing of our dragonfly. It's busying around, doing its thing. You can see from this one compared to that one how there are certain changes to it. And I noticed that we have these little moving lines here for the water. So I'm going to add those into this one before we end, because after we do all that erasing, we can always go back and add to it once we're done and see how there are things we can make it look a little more exciting. And so these little wavy lines make it look like the water is moving around. And so our line helps with that. Our line helps us with shading and highlights, as well as making our shapes, especially the organic shapes, because this is from nature. I just take a moment and look at it and think, what else would I like to do? I think I want to actually go over these narrow lines. I actually like the thicker lines. So therefore, that's what I'm going to do. Alrighty, this is A.M. Snyder from Snyder's Sunshine Art Studio.com. If you have enjoyed drawing along with me, I hope that you will check out the other videos I have on other bugs as well as other subjects, and I'm especially hopeful that I have shined some creativity into your art life, as well as new knowledge that you can take away and add to your drawings. Now, this is not going to get colored in this video, but I do intend on coloring it, so check out the additional companion video on how to color our dragonfly. lastly, let's just sign it at the bottom. A.M. Snyder from Snyder's Sunshine Art Studio.com. And just an additional reference here, I do have a course called How to Draw Fun Bugs, step by step, especially for kids, but it's not just kid oriented, and you can check that out at my website. And this is again A.M. Snyder from Snyder's Sunshine Art Studio with the website from Snyder's Sunshine Art Studio. I can't emphasize that enough, can I? Well, I've enjoyed sharing with you these techniques and how to draw this dragonfly, and I hope to see you again in a future video. Until next time, bye-bye.